Merry Christmas.
Good evening. We're going to call this meeting to order, and we're going to begin with an invocation by Dr. Bill Johnston with Dawson Memorial Baptist, followed by a Pledge of Allegiance. And please all stand with me.
Join with me as we pray. Father God, various religious persuasions celebrate this season in various ways, and I personally gather to express my appreciation for the one that I celebrate as my Savior, Jesus Christ. And so as all gather in various ways, we thank you for what we have and the freedom of this nation to celebrate. And as this body gathers, I pray your blessings upon them and help in all that they do this evening. We pray for our state, especially tomorrow, as our state gathers to many places to express at the polls their voice. And we pray, Father, that it be done decently and in order, and the voice be heard, whichever way, whatever way. May we gather as those who live in this state in ways to build this state and continue to be a state that lives the freedom that we have. So again, I thank you for this body. Bless them this evening. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Doctor, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Ms. Salter, roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Mr. Gwaltney? Here. Mr. Thames? Here. Mr. Higginbotham? Here. Mr. Wolverton? Mr. McCluskey? Here. Mr. Jones? Mrs. Smith? Here. Mr. Wyatt? Here. Mrs. Andress? Here. Mr. Wright? Here. Mr. Limbaugh?
Here. So we do have a quorum. Before we go any further, we do have two presentations of proclamations. We've got the first one, and we'll turn it over to you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. The first of two proclamations that we have this evening, if I can get the members of the Homewood Environmental Commission to come forward. They've worked really hard getting us some information. You're going to hear in the proclamation the month of November. I do realize it's December. But first of all, I didn't want you to think that that was a mistake, but instead of reading it in a committee meeting where not as many people are present, we wanted to do that in a full council meeting to get as much awareness to you as possible. So thank you for being here. So I'll simply read the proclamation. It says, whereas the city of Homewood acknowledges that a healthy urban forest composed of a significant portion of native trees is vital to public health, a sound infrastructure, civic pride, and the economic and aesthetic value of the city. And whereas the presence of an urban forest, when properly managed as part of a comprehensive landscape plan, will promote soil conservation, reduce flooding, improve air and water quality, reduce noise pollution, provide a buffer between residences and businesses, and increase property values. And whereas the city of Homewood finds that it's in the public interest and welfare of its citizens, present and future, to promote the protection of trees throughout the city. And whereas Green Skies Over Homewood is an annual native tree replenishment initiative run by the Homewood Environmental Commission. Whereas Arbor Day is observed throughout the nation and the world. So therefore, I, Scott McBrayer, Mayor of the City of Homewood, hereby proclaim the month of November as Tree Awareness Month, and the first Saturday of the month of November as Arbor Day. So again, on behalf of the residents and businesses in the city of Homewood, thank you for your continued work in the city and all that you do. So thank y'all very much. Thank y'all very much. You need to get on the wall. That's required for our tree application. Perfect. Thank y'all. Thank you. I'll never turn down the photo.
Wyatt?
very much. Thank y'all.
Thank you all. And Mayor, I understand you have another one as well.
For the second proclamation, I'm going to ask Mr. Chris Meeks to come forward. Chris, is it just us, buddy? Yes, sir. All right. How are you tonight? Good. Well, Chris certainly needs no introduction, but we're going to introduce him anyway. Chris has served for a long time on our park board, and we wanted to honor his service tonight by presenting a proclamation. And it says, whereas Mr. Christopher Meeks, during the 10 years he has served the city of Homewood, has significantly contributed to and assisted in developing and growing our park system and its facilities of the city of Homewood. And whereas the performance of his duties and responsibilities and his working relationships were always characterized by an obvious dedication to getting the job well done, and whereas Mr. Meeks' term of service on the Homewood Parks and Rec Board is now ending, he's being honored by friends and board members who are deeply appreciative of his contributions to the city during the years. And whereas Chris will be missed by his fellow board members, he plans to spend his time with family and friends and promoting Homewood Parks and Recreation. So now, therefore, I, Scott McBrayer, Mayor of the City of Homewood, hereby express my sincere appreciation and thanks to Mr. Chris Meeks for his contributions to the city, and highly commend him for the manner in which he's carried out his responsibilities as a member of the Homewood Parks and Recreation Board. And again, Chris, the city of Homewood's forever indebted to you. The countless hours that you've served the city in meetings and discussing things that most people didn't even know was being discussed until they saw it come to fruition. So you can look around and be proud of the work that you've helped accomplish in this city, and we're certainly grateful to you and to your family and to the park board. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Sure. Chris, thank you very much. We appreciate that. We do. All right. Next item would be reading of the minutes. We're going to carry that over for November 27th, 2017. We've got a couple of appointments that we need to open. One would be Ward 4's BZA. So we need to, do we have an appointment, or do
We have an appointment for that.
We do. The existing member, Brian Jarman, reapplied for his position, so we would like to appoint Brian Jarman to that Ward 4 seat that he already has.
I understand. So motion by Ms. Smith, second by Mr. Wyatt. Any further discussion? There being none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that is unanimous. Next item is the Ward 5 Homewood Environmental Commission appointment. Do we...
We need to reopen.
We need to reopen that one. Let's open that one until, I mean, it sounds like a while, but because of the holidays, let's open it until that meeting in January, which would be the 16th. Is that right, Mr. Kendrick?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay, we'll open it and leave it open until then, okay? Also, we have an HDRA appointment. Ms. Andrews?
Yes, Jared Vanderbleek. I would like to have him appointed to the HDRA. He is currently on the industrial board, I believe. I have that right. Is that right, Robert? The industrial board? Or is he on the...
Development, the CDA.
He's currently on the CDA, and I'd like to also appoint him to the HDRA.
Great. Ms. Andrews has a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Smith. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And if you will let him know, we would appreciate that.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I have one as well. Due to Mr. Meeks coming off the park board, the at-large position will be, I guess we need to open it on, can we open it on January 1st and run it to the 16th? the application period, or we can open it now and run it till the
Open it now and
16th?
run it through January
Okay.
16th.
If you wouldn't mind doing that, I would appreciate
We
it.
will do that, and I have great faith that the local folks will make that. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, any other items we need to cover in terms of appointments? There being none, we've got some alterations to the agenda tonight. The first one is an addition to the committee referral agenda. This would be item 11, 12, 17. This would be a request for consideration of data and power cost savings assessment requested by Andy Gwaltney, and this would be assigned to Finance, Ms. Smith. And then we've got another item that we're going to move from committee referral to other new business. Well, before that one, we're going to do 12, 12, 17, which is a request for consideration to retain Stifle for bond refinance requested by the city attorney. And then the next one will be the one that we'll move from committee referral to other new business, which will be following 12, 12, 17, and that's 03, 12, 17, and that is, hold on. That is request for consideration of refunding certain portion of city government warrants, or 2012 city government warrants, again requested by the city attorney. And so we will move that. Chair would welcome a motion and a second for approval of the amended agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Gwaltney. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Andrus. Any further discussion? There being none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And that is approved. Okay, we'll move on to consent agenda. Chair would welcome a motion and a second for approval.
So moved. Second.
Motion from Mr. Higginbotham, second from Mr. McCluskey. Any further discussion? There being none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mr. President?
Yes.
We skip over the reading of the minutes from the November 27th.
No, we did because
I didn't have them distributed.
we're carrying that over.
Carry
We
over.
are carrying that over.
My fault.
No problem. We can handle that next week perfectly okay. All right, old business agenda. The first item is 180817, which is the request for consideration of an ABC 160 retail, special retail more than 30 days license for 1918 Catering LLC, doing business as 1918 Catering, located at 197 Vulcan Road, requested by Melody Salter, our city clerk. Report from Public Safety, Mr. McCluskey.
The Public Safety
We've
Committee,
recorded that.
that's right, I know,
Okay.
finally voted 5-0 to recommend having no objections to the issuance of the license after receiving letters from both police and fire.
Outstanding. So we have a motion from Public Safety. Do we have any discussion on this particular item? There being none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that is passed unanimously. Okay. 210917, request to consider change in lodging tax rate for the city of Homewood, requested by Peter Wright. We'll start with a report from Finance, Ms. Smith.
Yes, the committee met last week and voted 3-2 to recommend approval of a 2% increase. After discussion from Chief Ross, he included some numbers about the number of calls and the cost of those calls to the hotels in the city limits. I made the motion for the 2% increase. I was seconded by Mr. Higginbotham. And again, that was a 3-2 vote coming out of Finance.
Okay. So we have a motion from Finance.
Two.
Yes, Mr. President. I have discussed with several members of the council about the 2% increase, and frankly, after talking with several members of the council, there seems to be a consensus for it to go and increase that up to 3% for this lodging tax increase. So I would ask that the motion coming out of Finance be amended to a 3% tax increase to be placed up for vote tonight.
Well, since it's being amended, I would say that's a motion from Mr. Wright. Do we have a second on that? Second from Mr. White. So where we go from here, I think, is a reading
Mr. Kendrick?
Yes, sir. We need to read the ordinance, and I'll read it.
Amended.
If you want to take the vote on the amendment, then I'll know what ordinance to read.
Okay, we can do that.
It's just that this motion, as I understood by Mr. Wright, to amend the motion that's pending to increase the lodging tax from 8% to 9% for the city of Homewood.
Correct. The 3% increase would increase it up to 9%.
If you vote on that amendment, then I'll read the ordinance the way the amendment, whatever amendment passes.
That's perfectly okay,
And
sir.
there'll need to be a unanimous consent motion and then a vote on
Gotcha.
passing.
All right. Procedurally, we want to be correct, and therefore, any questions about this? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to, I'm trying to clarify my recollection of this item, which has come before the committee several times, but I just want to make sure I remember it correctly. So the 3% would put us in line with the top cities in Jefferson County. It would put us at the equal to the highest lodging taxes, at least that we discovered. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mike.
But that would not put us above the highest.
I understand. I said
Okay.
equal to the highest that we. I was just making sure I was remembering that correctly. Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Therefore, anyone else? If there's not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay. Then
Yes.
Okay.
let's read this, if you will, Mr. Kendrick.
Yes, it's an ordinance to provide for the levy and assessment of a privilege or license tax in the nature of a lodging tax upon every person, firm, or corporation engaging in the business of renting or furnishing any room or rooms, lodging, or accommodation to transients in the city of Homewood, providing for the collection of the said tax and providing penalties for the violation. Be ordained by the City Council as follows. Section 1, levy of tax for the privilege of engaging and continuing within the city and the business hereinafter described there is hereby levied and assessed in addition to all other taxes of every kind now imposed by law which could be collected as herein provided a privilege or license tax upon every person, firm, or corporation engaging in the business described below and the amounts to be determined below. There is hereby levied and imposed in addition to all other taxes of every kind now imposed by law, a privilege or license tax upon every person, firm, or corporation engaging in the business of renting or furnishing any room or rooms, lodging, or accommodations to transients in any hotel, motel, inn, tourist camp, tourist cabin, or other places in which rooms, lodgings, or accommodation are regularly furnished to transients for a consideration and amount to be determined by the applicant of the rate of 9% of the charges of such rooms, lodging, or accommodations. Section 2, provisions of the state lodging tax statute applicable to this ordinance and taxes levied herein. This ordinance and the taxes levied herein shall be parallel to the state levy and assessment of the privilege or license tax levied by Chapter 26 of Title 40 of the Code of Alabama, subject to all terms, conditions, and definitions of the state lodging tax and set out in Chapter 26 of Title 40. Section 3, it shall be unlawful any person, firm, or corporation engaged in or continuing within the city any business for which a license or privilege tax is required by this ordinance to fail or refuse to add the price of the services rendered due by the taxpayer on account of the tax levied by this ordinance. Nor shall any person refund or offer to refund all or any part of the amounts collected or taxes under this ordinance, or to absorb such tax, or to advertise directly or indirectly the absorption or refund of taxes or any portion of the same. Any person, firm, or corporation violating the provisions of this section shall be guilty of a misdemeanor upon conviction, shall be fined in a sum not less than $50, not more than $100, or may be imprisoned in the city jail for not more than 6 months, or both such fine and imprisonment. Section 4, the ordinance is cumulative to the general license code or taxes. This ordinance shall not be construed to repeal any of the provisions of the general license code ordinances of the cities, but shall be held to be cumulative, and the amounts of the taxes herein levied shall be in addition to the amounts of other taxes and the license tax imposed by the city by its general license code or ordinances. Section 5, the effective date. The ordinance shall become effective the first day of February 2018, and the first payment of taxes therein levied shall be due and payable on the 20th day of March 2018 and the 20th day of each month thereafter. This ordinance shall remain in full force and effect and shall apply to each month of the year 2018, beginning with the month of February, and to each month of each calendar year thereafter from year to year. Section 6, the taxes levied and assessed by this ordinance is levied and assessed in lieu of the taxes levied by Ordinance 2381, previously adopted on January 19, 2009, which ordinance shall be rescinded and repealed as of the effective date of this ordinance so as not to create a gap or lapse in the time between the taxes levied by this ordinance and the prior ordinances. Section 7, the ordinance shall be codified under Article 7 entitled Hotel Motel Tax of Chapter 6 entitled Business License Tax and Regulations, and shall replace and modify the existing Section 6-131 through Section 6-134 of the Code of Ordinances upon their effective date. Section 8, if any part or provision of this ordinance declared to be unconstitutional or invalid by any court of competent jurisdiction, the parts not declared therefore shall remain in full force and effect, not be affected by such orders.
All right, thank you, Mr. Kendrick. Chair would welcome a motion and a second for unanimous consent.
So moved. Second.
All right, motion from Mr. McCluskey, second from Mr. Gwaltney. Roll call, please.
Mr. Gwaltney?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Thames?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Higginbotham?
Yes.
Mr. Wolverton?
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey?
Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Wyatt?
Yes.
Mrs. Andreas?
Yes.
Mr. Wright?
Yes.
And Mr. Limbaugh?
Yes. So this will be ordinance 2679. Chair would welcome a motion and a second for adoption.
So moved.
Motion
Second.
from Mr. McCluskey, second from Mr. Wright. All right, roll call, please, ma'am.
Mr. Gwaltney?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Thames?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Higginbotham?
No.
Mr. Wolverton?
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey?
Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Wyatt?
Yes.
Mrs. Andreas?
Yes.
Mr. Wright?
Yes.
And Mr. Limbaugh?
Yes. So this passes 8-1. Okay. All right, 07-1017, request for consideration to hear presentation reinvestment options on public fund investment account from Iberia Bank. Again, requested by Melody Salter, our finance director. Ms. Smith, a report.
Yes, committee met last week, and after hearing some suggestions from Ms. Salter and Mr. Burgett, we voted 5-0 to recommend approval of leaving $1 million in the existing account and then investing an additional $8 million in a different account. Motion was made by Mr. Wright, seconded by myself, and again, that was 5-0 for those recommendations.
All right, we have a motion from finance. Do we have any further discussion? There being none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that is passed unanimously. 14-1017, request for consideration for a directional change to the one-way for Reese Street, requested by Brett Thames. Mr. Thames, do we have a report from P&D?
We do. After consulting with our traffic department, they asked that Skipper review their previous study, taking into account the changes on Central Avenue, so we referred that item to Finance Committee.
Right, so we are referring that to finance, and we'll go forth. Okay, 18-1017, request to amend fiscal year 17-18 budget for fiscal year 16-17 encumbrances. Melody Salter, our finance director and city clerk. Report from finance, Ms. Smith.
Yes, the committee voted 5-0 to recommend approval of accepting the encumbrances. Motion was made by Mr. Thames, seconded by Mr. Higginbotham, and 5-0 to approve those.
All right, thank you, ma'am. We have a report from, we have a motion from finance. Do we have any other comments or questions? There being none, all in favor for this resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that is unanimous. That's Resolution 17-196. All right, next is 01-1117, request for consideration to allow work within the city right-of-way to remove decorative light pole in front of 187 West Oxmoor Road, requested by Chris Wade, the property owner. Vanessa McGrath with BEZ Department. Report from Special Issues, Ms. Smith.
Yes, Special Issues Committee met last week and voted 5-0 to recommend approving the removal of the decorative light pole, which will be, by the way, kept by the city and reused in another location probably. Motion was made by Mr. Higginbotham, seconded by Mr. Gwaltney, and again, that was a 5-0 vote to approve that.
All right, thank you. Since we have the motion from Special Issues, do we have any other comments? There being none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that is unanimous, and that is Resolution 17-197. All right, 04-1117, public hearing set for tonight.
for consideration of the zoning application of the City of Homewood to rezone 68, 70, and 90 Bagby Drive and 245, 255 Goodwin Crest Drive from C1, which is Office Building District, to I2, which is Institutional District, for the purpose of permitting construction of the proposed Homewood Public Safety Center. As a note, this was considered by the Planning Commission in their meeting of November 7th this year, resulting in a favorable vote of 5-0, requested by Vanessa McGrath. And the BEZ Department will start with a report from Special Issues. Ms. Smith.
Yes, Special Issues, we met last week and voted 5-0, or actually this was from November 20th, voted to recommend sending this out without recommendation pending the public hearing tonight. Motion was made by Mr. Gwaltney and seconded by Mr. Higginbotham, and that was 5-0 without recommendation.
All right, thank you very much. Well, we will open this public hearing, and we'll start with...
Do you want to read the ordinance first?
Okay. Well, you tell me which way to go, Mr. Kendrick.
I think if we read it, then the public would know what you might.
I think that's perfectly okay. Go.
It's an ordinance to further amend Ordinance 1602 of the City of Homewood entitled The Zoning Ordinance and the Zoning Map of the City of Homewood as previously adopted. Whereas the Planning Commission of the city has favorably recommended to the City Council that the property described herein be taken out of the current zone, city zone C1 Office Building District, and rezoned to the City of Homewood I2 and Institutional District zoning. Whereas the council has determined and found it necessary to desirable that a public hearing be set for December 11, 2007, at which time and place all persons interested in this matter shall be heard. Now therefore be it resolved be ordained by the City Council as follows, that the following described property described in Exhibit A, located with street address 68 Bagby Drive, 70 Bagby Drive, 90 Bagby Drive, 245 Goodwin Crest Drive, 255 Goodwin Crest Drive, be taken out of the current City of Homewood C1 zoning classification and rezoned to I2 Institutional District. Whereas from and after the enactment of this ordinance, that the property described herein shall be restricted for use as applicable to the I2 zoning district as set out in Ordinance 1602. Section 3, that December 11, 2017 at 6 o'clock p.m. at Homewood City Hall is determined to be the time and place for the public hearing. Section 4, that the clerk shall give notice of the public hearing for December 5, 2017, and provide notice to all property owners within 500 feet of the property described herein. Section 5, that if any part of provision of the ordinance declared to be unconstitutional or invalid by any court of competent jurisdiction, all of the parts provisions of the ordinance not affected thereby shall remain in full force and effect. Section 6, the ordinance shall become effective upon its passage and approval of the City Council and Mayor of the City of Homewood, or as otherwise becoming law.
Thank you, Mr. Kendrick. All right, so the public hearing is open, and we'll start with you, Ms. McGrath.
Yes, sir. This is just some housekeeping. We're rezoning the city-owned property at the addresses Mr. Kendrick said, 68, 70, and 90 Bagby, and then 245 and 255 Goodwin Crest Drive, to facilitate the Homewood Public Safety Facility going on at 70 and 90 Bagby Drive. I guess it's actually just 90. 68 and 70 are currently our streets and public building for, can't think of the words, where we can fix our cars. Thank you, fleet maintenance. I'm like, what is the name of that thing?
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. But that's what we're...
All right, is there any questions by any council members for Ms. McGrath while she's up here?
Since I can't talk tonight.
We think it's pretty self-explanatory. We understand. All right, is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak to this matter? All right, there being none, we will close this public hearing. All right, we will now request a motion for unanimous consent with a second.
So moved. Second.
Right. Mr. Thames, followed by a second of Mr. Higginbotham. Okay. Now, any comments from council members? There being none, could we have a roll call?
Yes, sir. Mr. Gwaltney?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Thames?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Higginbotham? Mr. Wolverton? Mr. McCluskey?
Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Wyatt?
Yes.
Mrs. Andress?
Yes.
Mr. Wright?
Yes.
Mr. Limbaugh?
Yes.
So this will be ordinance 2680, 2680, and the chair would welcome a motion and a second for adoption.
So moved. Second.
All right, motion by Mr. Higginbotham, second by Mr. Gwaltney. Roll call again, please, ma'am.
Mr. Gwaltney?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Thames?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Higginbotham? Mr. Wolverton? Mr. McCluskey? Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Wyatt?
Yes.
Mrs. Andress?
Yes.
Mr. Wright?
Yes.
Mr. Limbaugh?
Yes, so ordinance 2680 is passed unanimously, and we will move on to 051117, request to address Homewood Middle School traffic concerns, requested by Britt Thames. Report from Public Safety, Mr. McCluskey.
Yes, the Public Safety Committee voted 5-7 to recommend approval of the school zone signs to be added in-house on Evergreen, St. Charles, Mecca, and as well along Irving. The motion was made by Mr. Thames, seconded by Councilor Wyatt, and we've also got this put back on to address further issues at a later time in committee.
Okay, but we're going to address the sign part now. Okay, good. All right, so we have a motion from Public Safety. At this point, are there any questions?
I'd just like to add one more street that we left off, that's Dale. Put some signage on Dale, please.
So we'll make the Public Safety amended.
Yes.
So since it is being amended, Mr. Thames, and you've offered the first, who would offer the second? Second from Mr. White. Okay? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And that is unanimous. And we move on to 111117, public hearing set for tonight for consideration of the economic incentive package for the former Mountain Brook Inn property, requested by Mayor McBrayer and Dan Lovell with Graham and Company. And let me begin with a report from Finance. Ms. Smith.
Yes, this was actually at the Finance Committee meeting on November 20th, and we heard a presentation from Graham and Company, who is developing the property, and the Finance Committee voted 3-0 to recommend setting the public hearing for tonight, and of course we'll send that out, I assume, without recommendation pending the public hearing tonight.
Right, good. So we will open the public hearing. Mr. Graham, would you like to speak to this matter? And if you will, state your name and...
Yes, ladies and gentlemen of the Homewood Council, I'm Mike Graham with Graham & Company, 1801 Fifth Avenue North, Birmingham. This concerns part of the old Mountain Brook Inn site on Highway 280. Our partnership bought that about 11 years ago, and we've been working on various developments. And we finally gotten to the point where we've attracted a new restaurant to Birmingham called Brick Tops. Brick Tops is headquartered in Nashville, Tennessee. They have several locations in the southeast. I personally dined there a couple times in the Nashville location, and it's a great high-end type restaurant, white tablecloth. So we're very excited that they're interested in coming to this site. So we proposed an economic package that we presented to the Finance Committee about a month ago for revenue sharing with respect to sales tax, and that was seemed like it was favorably received, and so we're to the next step here to meet before the council. The economics of the deal are it's a ground lease, and the landlord is spending about $586,000 on infrastructure, which is sewer and water lines, and bringing in a new entrance into the property, located on the same location as the current entrance, but just improved. And then the tenant is building their building on top of the property. They're investing about $4 million in the restaurant, so it's about an investment of $4,586,000 for this restaurant. And the request is for a revenue sharing of 50% of the city's portion of the sales tax on their revenue, and their projections of sales of the restaurant is around $5 million per year. And there will be a maximum on the reimbursement of $300,000. And I think the request is for over 10 years, but likely the payback would happen over 4 years, and then it'd be done. And So that's the kind of the economic summary of it.
Great.
Any questions?
That means that you've explained it well, Mr. Graham. Thank you very much.
I just want to say one thing from Ward 5 residents. I know we talked about this as far as maintaining a good buffer with the evergreen, the plan for the neighbors that are right there behind you and the neighbors, and being respectful of their property, and I just have to put that in for them.
Yes, there's a prescribed buffer behind the, I think a 10-foot buffer, and we definitely honor that.
Thank you.
Yeah, hopefully they'll be a good neighbor, and people will be excited about going there.
Absolutely.
We appreciate that. Mr. Kendrick.
Mr. President, for the council and the public's information, this is Amendment 772, Special Economic Development Agreement. Mr. Graham has set out the general terms, but we're required and did publish notice of this public hearing in the Birmingham News on December 1st. And the public hearing essentially attaches to the resolution authorizing a special economic agreement by the city and MX 2800 LLC and Exhibit A, which is the development agreement. I would say Mr. Graham summarized it correctly, other than just a clarification, and it's not really a clarification, but to point out that we're only talking about the city's 50% of the 3% tax. It does not involve anything dealing with the 4 other 1 cent that goes to the schools. And it is for a maximum of $300,000 up to a 10-year period, but if they meet their projections, that will be done probably in 3 or 4 years. All other taxes, business license, property taxes, all other things are simply still applicable to this property and this development. Because this is a 772 amendment, the city will file a validation suit in the circuit court, and this agreement would not be effective until that validation has been approved by the court. It also requires that the restaurant shall open. If for any reason the restaurant doesn't open, then the incentive package doesn't apply, and if for any reason they close after opening, then the city's no longer obligated to provide any incentives.
Good.
This is an
Thank
additional summary of them.
Well, all right. And, I would also make the commentary with a 200-seat restaurant. Our hope and expectation is that Mr. Graham and Mr. Kendrick's timetable will be accurate. So with that, is there anyone else who would like to speak to this item? If there's no one else, we will close this public hearing. And since the report from Finance was to send it to the public hearing, the chair would welcome a motion and a second for approval.
I would move to approve.
All right, a motion by Ms. Smith. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, we have a second from Ms. Andrus. All right, this will be, we're still going to pass a resolution, Mr. Kendrick,
Yes,
correct?
sir. It's be a resolution.
17-198.
Yes, sir.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay.
Who was that?
I'm sorry, Mr. McCluskey. So it passed 8-1?
9-1.
9-1. I'm sorry. Well, no.
Yeah, there's 10 of us.
Okay, that's right, 9-1. Okay, thank you very much. All right, thank you. All right, we'll move on to 13-11-17, request to authorize the mayor to bid recycling services and set bid opening date, requested by Melody Salter, our finance director and city clerk. Is there a report from finance on this item, Ms. Smith?
Other than just to say that we set the bid opening date for December 18th at 5 o'clock prior to our council meeting that night.
Great, thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on to 16-11-17, request for consideration of declaring the following vehicles and parts surplus property: a Kohler generator, 275 kilowatt diesel that ends in 480, a 500-gallon generator fuel tank that the serial number ends in 278, a 2011 International 7400 4x2, the VIN ends in 368 653, a 55-gallon material handling clamp for a forklift, a shop air compressor 10 horsepower, a shop air compressor 5 horsepower, an air compressor that's 1.5 horsepower, all requested by Gordon James, our fleet maintenance. Report from Finance, Ms. Smith.
Yes, the committee met last week and voted 5-0 to recommend approval of making these vehicles and parts surplus.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Wright, seconded by Mr. Higginbotham.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kendrick?
Yes, sir, it's an ordinance to declare certain municipal property of the Fleet Maintenance Department items of surplus. It's hereby established and declared that the following described personal property of the city is no longer needed for public or municipal purposes, never declared surplus property. And Mr. Limbaugh has adequately described the property. I won't do that again. Section 2, the mayor and the clerk being authorized and directed to dispose of the property by auction to the highest bidder.
All right, thank you, sir. Chair would welcome a motion and a second for unanimous consent.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Smith, second by Mr. McCluskey. Roll call, Ms. Salter.
Mr. Gwaltney?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Thames?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Higginbotham?
Yes.
Mr. Wolverton? Yes. Mr. McCluskey?
Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Wyatt?
Yes.
Mrs. Andress?
Yes.
Mr. Wright?
Yes.
And Mr. Limbaugh?
Yes. So this will be ordinance 2681. Chair would welcome a motion and a second for adoption.
So moved.
Oh, second.
All right. Okay. Who was first? Help me. Mr. Gwaltney is first, seconded by Ms. Smith. Roll call.
Mr. Gwaltney?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Thames?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Higginbotham?
Yes.
Mr. Wolverton? Yes. Mr. McCluskey?
Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Wyatt?
Yes.
Mrs. Andress?
Yes.
Mr. Wright?
Yes.
Mr. Limbaugh?
Yes. So 2681 is passed by a vote of 10-0. All right, we'll move on to 181117. Request for consideration to allow work within the city right-of-way to improve the alley located behind the house located at 306 Redfern Street. Requested by Ken Gunnels, the owner. Vanessa McGrath, BEZ Department. Report from Special Issues, Ms. Smith. You're busy tonight.
Y'all get sick of hearing my voice. The Special Issues Committee met last week, voted 5-0 to recommend approval of the work pending the proper indemnification agreements. I cannot say that word. And also we asked Mr. Gunnels to speak to his neighbors and make sure they were okay with that work. And motion was made by Ms. Andress and seconded by Mr. Gwaltney. And again, that was 5-0 coming out of Special Issues.
All right, so we have the motion from Special Issues. Do we feel like those conditions have been met?
Well, Mr. Gunnels is here if we want him to come forward and
Mr. Gunnels, you're welcome to come forward.
Yeah, so we sent a
Wait a minute, I'm sorry. Your name and address.
Oh, sorry. Ken Gunnels, 306 Redfern Street, here in Homewood.
Thank you.
Yes, we sent out a message out to all the neighbors. 2 have responded. One with a question about if it would increase the traffic on the alley, and we told them that it would just be an alternative route out the house, or when it got like the snow this last Friday, instead of our very steep driveway. Another has voiced support for the repair. And as far as I think we were supposed to get with Wyatt about a plan. We were working with our contractor to arrive at that plan.
All right.
Is that all you need?
Yep, that's it.
That's it.
Thank you.
Indemnity last week.
I have it.
Great.
I think I did. Okay.
All right, any other questions of Mr. Gunnels? There being none, all in favor of this resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There being none, then that's Resolution 17-199, and it passes unanimously. 1911-17, request for consideration to allow a 6-foot privacy front yard fence along the property line beyond the front of the house and T-olive hedges along the front property line located at 10112 Melrose Place, requested by Linda Needham, the owner, Vanessa McGrath, our BEZ department. And what we will do now is set a public hearing for 1/16 of 2018. Okay? Now, next, public hearing 2211-17. Public hearing set for December 18th, 2017 at 6 p.m. for consideration of the zoning application of the City of Homewood to rezone 123 West Oxmoor Road, 100 and 900 Homewood Park West, and 240 Snow Drive from M1, which is Light Manufacturing District, to I1, which is Institutional District, to I3, Institutional District, for the purpose of rezoning 7 parcels for consistent zoning owned by the City of Homewood to permit the development of West Homewood Park. And we would point out that this request was considered by the Planning Commission on November 15th, resulting in a favorable vote, or favorable recommendation of 6-0.
requested by Vanessa McGrath and our Planning and Development Committee. So again, we will carry this over for a public hearing next Monday night at 6 p.m.
President Limbaugh, could I just make a point for you move on?
Please do.
Back on 19/11/17 that you just set the public hearing on 1/16/18, I did for the record want to note that we had a typo on the address and it's just 1012 Melrose Place. Yeah. I just was making sure we pointed that out.
Okay, so we've got an extra one in there.
Yes, sir.
So it is 1012.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much for correcting us. All right. So, public hearing set for tonight, 25/11/17. Public hearing set for tonight at 6 p.m. for consideration of condemning a house at the following address, 1705 26th Avenue South, requested by Wyatt Pugh, and we will begin with a report from Planning and Development.
Yes, sir. The committee met and voted 5-0 to send this out without recommendation pending the public hearing.
Great. So we will open the public hearing and welcome anyone to come forward to speak. Before you speak, we'd like for you to sign your name and address here with the city clerk. And I would say to any of y'all, please limit any comments to 3 minutes. That's been our standard operating procedure for 5 years now.
Yeah, and you can
Yes, sir. If you will, microphone right here, please, sir. And again, state your name and address, please.
Thank you. My name is Mamoon Al-Tahir. I'm the owner of the building. And I'm a little bit surprised about this. I've not received a letter. The last time I came here was for some issues about the grass, and I did take care of it. I have spent about $3,000 for the roofing, and I already have a contract with somebody, and he disappeared on me. He had $5,000. I've been looking for him for the last 2 years, okay? But it's my house, and I want to come and live in it. And I was very surprised about the condemnation. And I don't know. I mean, had I at least had an idea of somebody tell me.
You live there?
Yeah, that's my house.
You currently live there.
Okay.
Have you been contacted?
You
by
hadn't
the
seen a
city?
sign on the front?
No, I saw the sign. That's what I saw the sign. Immediately, I called. I went to West Oxford Road there, and they told me I spoke to somebody who's in engineering, and he told me, well, the best thing to do is just come to a meeting, because I was hoping for him to come inside and see the building and inspect it, tell me what it is. How would that happen? Because at least I thought would have been there was anything to do with the structure. Somebody would have inspected and said this is bad or this is bad, whatever, it's not good. But I've never received anything. And I'm very surprised about it. The only thing I saw when I saw the sign on the
Okay, let me ask you to step back just for a second, and we may get you back up here. Okay. Who from the city? Here we go, Mr. Pugh.
When I went out to take a look at it in August, the house appeared to be abandoned, and it appeared that the house had been on fire at one point. Up around the rafters and around the attic vent, there was signs of smoke damage. The trees and the shrubs were grown up to the point where I don't even really know how you'd get in the front door at that time, for sure. I did send out a letter after we had our meeting with the Housing Code Abatement Board, and they recommended that I send out an unsafe structures notice. I did that on August 23rd, sent that certified mail. That letter did come back unopened, so
You also post the building, do you not?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The signs,
Okay.
actually at the
We
same
need
time.
for you to tell the city council why it's unsafe and present whatever evidence, if there is any, about why it's unsafe before they can consider taking any action.
Absolutely, sure. There were open windows, and there was the open attic vent. Basically, it was a situation where wildlife could get in, the elements could get in. There could be anything from wildlife to dangerous mold growing in there, and children could get in. So whenever you have a property like that that's just completely grown up and people can get in and it appears to be abandoned, it's a nuisance and it's a danger.
All right, Mr. Pugh, while you're up here, is there any questions from Mr. Higginbotham?
Thank you for that, Mr. Pugh. I'm trying to understand what you told me and what the gentleman said. So you entered the house at that time when you
No.
entered? Okay,
No.
you just observed it from outside.
Right. When I say there were open situations, there was an open window. There was a busted out window.
You could just see into the house.
You can see in, yeah.
And it did not appear to be occupied, no furniture or?
That's correct.
Okay,
That's
thank you.
correct.
All right.
Bruce, can I ask a question?
Yeah,
real quick?
sure, Ms.
And
Smith.
it's actually a question for Scott. Is this one of the homes that was posted for overgrowth?
Hold on just a second.
Is that?
Scott, can you come forward?
I'm sorry.
This man has been here before, but
Yeah.
it's not relevant to unsafe building.
Right. No, I was curious. This is a house that we've seen before for overgrowth, yes?
That's correct.
Okay.
And at the
Okay.
time, it was declared a public nuisance, and he did come and clean up the property to come in
Okay.
compliance.
Okay, gotcha.
Has there
thank
been any,
Is there any other questions of Mr. Pugh?
yes, I was going to ask Mr. Pugh, has there been any
Ms.
improvement on the, thank you, I'm sorry, Mr. President. Has there been any other improvement on the property since you're able to say, are they making improvement?
No, there hasn't, and no one's come and talked to our department about taking out a permit for any of the improvements either. So,
Can I ask a question, Mr. Pugh?
Sure.
You're the chief building inspector for the city, is that right?
yes, sir.
Is the building unsafe in your opinion?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right, thank you, sir. We appreciate it. All right, is there anyone else who would like to speak to this matter?
I would just add, and this is true for all of the properties listed this evening, Mr. Gwaltney and I met with representatives from the community, and long before the city's abatement board voted to put the property owners on notice, the community sent letters to every available address that we could find to make an attempt to reach out to this and other owners before it got to that point. Anything on this list this evening, this property included, did not respond to those initial outreaches from the community. So,
All right, thank you, Mr. Times. Anyone else? Mr. Wright?
I just have one question, Mr. White, and I'm sorry I didn't get him, but the principal danger, as I understand, or concern is, or is it not, that the windows and it's open for children to get in and get hurt, animals and the elements. Is that the principal danger?
Yes, sir. That's kind of one of the general rules of thumb when it comes to public nuisance properties is if it's open to entrance by wildlife or people, and abandoned.
And is it still open today, as far as you know? I don't mean as in right this hour, but I mean...
Sure. As far as I know, last time I looked at it, yes, sir.
Okay.
Can I ask how long ago that was that you...
Probably the last time I went by there was a month.
So you've been by multiple times?
I've been, oh, sir, certainly.
And I guess just to clarify, I'm a little confused because it sounded like it was stated that it's being lived in currently, but it did not appear that way. Is that correct?
It did not appear that way. No, sir, not when I posted it.
Thank you, sir. All right. Any other questions or comments from the council? If not, we will. I'm sorry. Sure. One more comment. Yes, sir. Come on.
Well, I'm really sorry that he's not honest because we could never see anything from anywhere, okay? Unless, because all of it is locked. The broken window is through at the back, but you can never know what you put inside. Nobody could get inside the house. Now I have pictures of that. When I took these pictures were taken when what was claimed during the hearing of being nuisance, okay? But I have the pictures right now to show it to you. What he was saying is not true.
Well, sir, let me say this to you. One, there's a process. Two, we, the city, got no response from you on this. No. We got no response from you, sir.
I'm not receiving about what?
I'm talking about from the certified letter to the sign we put in your front yard. We got no, we got no communication from you to this point.
Immediately when I got the sign there, I called and I went. Yes,
that's not what I'm hearing from our engineering department.
Do you live in the house currently? I asked you that a minute ago.
I'm not living in it.
Well, so what you told me a minute ago wasn't true.
What's that?
I remember that's the first question I asked you. Are you living in the house?
No, I misunderstood what he's saying, but my address is still there. Everything I got is still there.
You didn't understand I asked you if you lived in the house?
Are you telling me right now I'm living in it?
Tonight, yeah. I just asked you that question.
No.
You don't live there, do you?
No.
It's nobody lives there, do they?
No.
And has there been fire damage there?
Exactly, absolutely right. There was fire and I stopped working.
Right, thank you, sir. I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Kendrick.
No, I'm trying to get some facts from this man about what we're doing. So it's abandoned house. Nobody, any power to the house?
No.
No power?
Because it's still under remodeling.
I'm sorry?
It's still under remodeling.
Remodeling?
Yes. I have put the new roof.
Do you have a permit for that?
Yes, I did.
When?
I did. I had at the time when I had it twice.
That was a couple of years ago, though.
Right.
Those permits expire after 6 months.
You are absolutely right. But see, what 2 years ago, what happened, the contractor who took the contract and he took my money, I could not find it.
I understand that, but all I'm asking is to tell me the truth if I asked you a question. There's no permit outstanding for any improvements or remodeling at that house currently.
Right now?
You don't live there currently.
No.
There's been present fire damage. There's been fire damage to the home.
Yes.
And that you acknowledge the broken windows.
Yes.
And the public, animals, whatever.
No, because the window is about the height of the window is no way you could get in. Because see, at the back, and there was I could show it to you. There's no way at all. If anybody could get in.
If you have a picture you'd like to present to the council, please do.
Okay.
It's going to be hard for us to put your phone in the record, so maybe it would help if you would maybe print that out, if you want to present it to the council.
Okay, I'll do it.
Can you text it to the clerk? Can you?
That's the back that puts the
You need to
show it, if you would, sir. Start with.
Text it to somebody. I'll give him mine.
Sure. Would you like to text that to the city clerk?
Could it be emailed to the city?
Me or text it? I will get my card.
Mr. Lamont, I've got a question.
Sure, Mr. Thames.
Can either the property owner or one of our city representatives, do we know when this house burned?
Yes, it was.
When did it burn?
Please, in the microphone.
4 years.
Sir?
It burned 4 years ago.
Yes.
And you haven't taken any steps to repair or make this property safe since then?
I did. The first thing I did, I put the roof, the new roof, okay? And the interior, where all the, what do you call it?
Sir, again, excuse me, microphone.
Go to the microphone, please.
Okay, first for the roof and the interior, where the burns happen, all the alligator wood, whatever you call it, is being taken off, replaced with the with the new wood. So the structure inside, okay, is already, and the floor also being new ones, okay? But it's not completed. The only thing that has need to be completed inside is to put the rock sheets and all that stuff in.
All right, I have a question. Excuse me just a second. So the home has been abandoned for at least 4 years?
You could say that, yes, absolutely.
At least 4
Yes.
years?
Yes.
Now,
When the fire occurred, was the house sprinkled by the fire department? Did they spray it down?
Yes.
Okay.
all right. Any other questions?
Where do you currently live?
Currently, I live in North Birmingham.
What's your address?
615 4th Avenue North.
All right. Do you want any further correspondence that comes from the city sent to that address? We need to know how to get in touch with you.
I say every day I get my mail. It's from me or my cousin who's here live with them.
Tell me the address where you want all future mail directed to you from the city.
It could be the same, or if you want to give it like 6.
Well, we sent something there and you didn't go pick it up, so let's don't do that again.
615 4th Avenue North.
615 4th Avenue North?
Yes.
Birmingham, Alabama?
Yes, 35203.
35203?
Yes.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right, any other questions from any council member?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to clarify something, make sure I'm understanding it correctly. You said following the fire, you replaced the roof, and you pulled some wood that had been burned.
Right.
That was 4 years ago.
Well, through the 3 to 4 years, yes.
Okay, and you don't have any active permits, as I understand from our folks in BEZ.
The reason...
Can I ask my question, and then you can say whatever you want. So when was the last time any work was done on the house at all?
About a year ago.
So it's been a year since any work has been done on the house. Okay, and then you can say, whatever else you wanted to say, feel free to go ahead and say it.
Well, the reason why I don't have any active one because the contractor puts in the money, okay? He's the one who's, you know, I mean, if I'm doing work by myself, I could go and get. But if a contractor is holding the job, he's the one who gets the work done. So he got paid for that, and I think for some period of time, he was sick, and then he disappeared. He changed his phone number, being fine. You know, do you believe that? Last month, I went and stayed at Home Depot at Crestwood for about 2 hours, just, you know, hoping to see him coming there. Okay, but I didn't see him. And I asked people there at Home Depot about if they could give me the list of the contractors who come there. Okay, they didn't. But I tried to get him because I got more money. But the mere fact that I really want to come and live in my house. If it took whatever it is, and the word abandoned, the way you said, it's not abandoned per se, it's the way it's being described. Abandoned that nobody cares for it, okay? But it's my house and I care for it. And I know one thing, hundreds of people come and ask me they wanted to buy the house, okay? And I have somebody who is living at the back of my house, I mean, on the back of the house, okay? He's inciting a lot of things, you know, about people. So I don't know what it is. And I know the city is doing whatever it is to protect the city from whatever it is, okay? But what just that guy said about people getting in, I'm absolutely surprised to hear that. Because in no way that broken window there, okay? And all the other windows are how do you call it? Boarded.
Sir, as I said, we limit this to 3 minutes. I understand your points.
Okay.
One other individual has a question, Mr. Higginbotham. Mr. McCluskey?
Yes, we've been talking about the past. Do you have any plans to do anything to the house moving forward?
Absolutely. 100% possible, yes.
Within what timetable?
Okay, within the next...
No, that's, I mean...
I'm going to put it within the next 2 months, okay? And as a matter of fact, possibility, okay? Just go ahead and get a loan from the bank. That's one of the things we're working with my daughters for it. and go forward with it.
Okay.
Today, if I could find a reasonable.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. President, could you spell your name?
M-A-M-O-U-N. Then the last name is E. Edward L. Lamb T. Tom A. Apple H. Henry I. N. R. Red.
We're having trouble reading your name, your writing, and I'm sorry to ask again.
E. L. T. A. H. I. R.
I got an E-L-T.
All right. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Please have a seat. All right. Anyone else that wants to speak to this matter? If not, we will close this public hearing. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. Please come forward. But I need you to register. I will rescind that closing. I understand. If you
Good evening.
I need your name and address over here. We need a record in writing of everything as well as... Now, please state your name and address, please.
All right, thank you. Good evening. My name is Altahir Hassan. I live in 1725th Court South.
Okay.
He's my cousin. And unfortunately, after his house burned, he went through a lot. He had two daughters at university, plus he lost his job, and a lot of things going. Plus, he had a lot of harassment from his neighbor. He tried his best to keep the house clean and also to do his best to repair the house. Unfortunately, his contractor just disappeared after he finished the roofing. We looked for him, we could not find him. But we're really surprised when we found that note of demolitions. I asked him and I said, did you have any correspondence? He said to me, no. Unfortunately, the correspondence just came about 2 days ago. I live very close. I check his mail periodically. And if anything's normal, I communicate with him. But all we want is a little bit of fair act that he will be able to finish what he's doing. They've got two daughters studying. One of them, she's doing medicine. She's about to graduate. Definitely by the, she finished everything. She will start her residency by June 2019. And definitely, he is trying his best to give his kid good education and also to fix the house. But it seems like it's just continuous, I'm not saying harassment, but continuous, somebody's bothering him. We have got a lot of citations about just cleaning the house and cleaning the grass and all that. And we keep doing it, and it's still adding up. But just we wanted to know, really, for how long this is going to be. He promised he's going to do something about the house. He promised he's going to fix it. And definitely he will.
2 points that are extremely important here. Point number one is there are neighbors that are unhappy with that particular residence. And two, no one's lived there for at least 4 years.
The problem is the neighbor. The problem is the neighbor.
Well, there's a problem with more than one neighbor. But this, a public hearing is not a forum for a debate, sir. Nor should this one be. We appreciate your point. Is there anyone else who would like to ask any questions? If there are not, thank you very much for what you had to say. Thank you. All right, Mr. Kendrick?
Yes, sir.
Did you close the public hearing? Did you close it again? Did you close it again, the public hearing?
Oh, okay. Let me close the public hearing. Thank you. Now, if this were to be continued for 60 or 90 days, would that be an option?
Yes, sir. If you announced it tonight and the homeowner to acknowledge that he knows that he's when the public hearing would be, and we wouldn't have to renotice it. You certainly could do that.
Okay.
But I'd like for him to acknowledge that on the record if your council sees fit to do that.
Yes, could you come forward and acknowledge that? If we were to say that within 90 days, we need to see an action plan for restoring that home to a usable condition.
Mr. Kendrick, also, can you describe the process, assuming we take a vote this evening?
Yes, sir. If the council adopts a resolution finding this property to be unsafe pursuant to Section 1153A of the Code of Alabama, the property owner has 30 days to which he can appeal your decision to the circuit court, and we could not take any action during that period. After that period, without an appeal, essentially the building inspector is authorized to demolish the property.
Mr. President.
Go ahead, yes. No,
Mr.
please.
President, in regard to if there's consideration of an extended period of time, I'm personally not in favor of an extension to receive a plan. Personally only in favor of an extension to see material, concrete improvements, bar none. Don't want to hear about the problems and excuses. I want to see results. This council member states that with regard to any consideration of an extension.
Mr. President, I would say, there are 30 days before the city can even legally act. To me, that seems reasonable to give someone 30 days to at the very least pull a permit for planned work on the home. There's nothing that says we actually have to act on day 31. If we see some sort of process, or he's pulled a permit or has a plan in place, then, obviously this is the last thing we want to do. We'd be willing to work with the property owner. But I will say, he has been noticed. It sounded like from his cousin's statement, they have received citations in the past from the city. We have repeatedly cut grass, collected trash. I believe we've moved some vehicles. So, the city's already put time and effort into this property, and if he has been receiving the citations, he hasn't been responding to them. I think another 30 days for him to go to the 4th floor and pull a permit and have a plan behind it is ample time without having to reschedule a hearing or delay a hearing.
Is that your motion?
It is.
Second. All right. Motion for Mr. Thames, second for Mr. McCluskey. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Mr. President, I'd like to let you know the City Council has adopted a resolution. You're welcome to get a copy of it from the City Clerk, finding this property unsafe under Section 1153A, the Code of Alabama. You have a right of 30 days from this date to file an appeal to the circuit court if you see fit to do that. Otherwise, after 30 days expiration, the city is authorized to demolish this property, to essentially then take the cost of demolition and assess it as a lien against the property.
So
you understand all that?
No, I don't understand what I'm saying. So that means I don't have a grace period to show you anything, right?
No, sir. 30 days. You got 30 days to come get a permit and do whatever you need.
With a permit.
All right, okay, yeah. So 30 days, I got a permit to start already, right?
But you'll only get a permit if you're progressing work. It's not a permit to stall.
It's okay, fine. What I'm saying, so I have 30 days to start working on it, right? So what are you telling me?
You have a right of 30 days to appeal it to the circuit court. City won't take any action for 30 days.
No, I don't understand. No. If I have somebody who's coming...
Let me say this to you. You can wait after this hearing, and I'll certainly be glad to talk with you about this, but I've explained the process to you, and I really don't have anything else to say to you. I'd be glad to try to answer your questions after we move on.
If you want to stay around and have an individual conversation with our city attorney, you're welcome to do that. But this is Resolution 17-200, and it passed.
Yes,
so, thank you, sir. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right, next item, 261117, public hearing set for tonight for consideration of condemning a house at the following address, 2522 18th Place South, requested by Wyatt Pugh. And again, a report from Planning and Development, Mr. Thames.
Yes, sir. The committee voted, and after hearing a report from Mr. Pugh, voted 5-0 to send it out to council without recommendation pending the public hearing.
All right, thanks, sir. We will open this public hearing. Is there anyone who wants to speak to this matter involving this property? Mr. Pugh, you want to tell us about what you discovered on 2522 18th Place South, sir?
Yes, sir. This particular one, in my opinion, it is dangerous because the roof system is seriously collapsing. It's the entire center of the house is sort of collapsed in on itself. When I was out there around back, I was able to go around back of the house. The back door had a hasp and lock on it that had been defeated. Somebody had just kicked the door in, and it was actually just standing open. I didn't go in, but those two things combined, and the house sits in that condition today, and it appears to be abandoned. So
the key is unsafe.
It is unsafe in my opinion. Yes, sir.
All right, thank you, sir. Any questions of Mr. Pugh? All right, is there anyone else who wants, thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who wants to speak to this matter? If not, we will close this public hearing, and the chair would welcome a motion for approval of 261117. Motion from Mr. Thames, second. From Mr. Wolverton. Any further discussion? There be none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that is resolution 17201. And that is passed. 271117, public hearing set for tonight for consideration of condemning a house at the following address: 2522 Central Avenue, requested by Wyatt Pugh. Report for planning and development. Mr. Thames.
Yes, sir. Committee met, and after hearing a report from Mr. Pugh, voted 5-0 to send the item out to full council without recommendation pending the public hearing.
All right, thank you. We will open this public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to speak to this particular matter? If there is not, we will then close this public hearing. And the chair would welcome a motion in a second. I'm sorry, Mr. Pugh, come on. Excuse me, you were talking.
All right, I do have pictures of these, by the way, so I'll pass these around if you'd like.
Please do. We will get them back to you and a copy to our city attorney. They just need to be in the record.
One of the pictures is just of the house. It's just a stock photo, and the other one is from the public hearing notice that was posted on November 30th. In my opinion, this house is unsafe. It's dilapidated, it's abandoned, and it's open. There were open windows, and I believe there was an open basement door on this one when I was there. So, in my opinion, it is unsafe.
All right, any questions of Mr. Pugh? There be none.
Mr. Chairman, just not a question so much as just an addition. I actually went by and drove by all these properties today, and in addition to whatever else may be open, the second floor opens onto like a roof balcony thing, and the door is just either open or gone. There's no door on the second floor. Just a note, you can't tell that from the picture.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Higginbotham. All right, one more time. Is there anyone else to speak to this particular matter? To this matter?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. If you would, sign in, please. We always want a record of who's here.
If you just speak for the record, I might be able to understand this.
I'm Jill Prestridge, and I live at 1336 58th Street South in Birmingham.
Yes, ma'am.
And I was curious to know if all of these houses that are going to be abated, if you're planning to request a bid for proposal to get maybe like 3 contractors to give you prices on the lowest bidder, or how do you choose which company will demolish the houses? Or does the city of Homewood go demolish them and you just pick a price?
Mr. President.
Like labor of your employees, is that the price, or?
Mr. Kendrick? That really is up to the city, but what does that have to do with the unsafe condition that we're talking about?
Because the price of demolishing the houses are going to be put as a lien on the property holder.
They are?
Yeah.
Do you have an interest in this property? Mm-hmm. Okay. It'd be helpful if you tell us why you think it's not unsafe.
Oh, I know it's unsafe. Yeah, I'm just curious as to how much the lien is going to be.
Oh, I don't, Mr. Pugh can speak to the process, but we're not required to take bids. We've always, some houses we've done ourselves, but not frequently because we don't demolish homes because it requires capping of sewer, cutting off utilities, things that normally are not in the municipal maintenance area. So, Mr. Pugh, I don't know how you might speak to that. So, I appreciate you acknowledging it's unsafe.
Mr.
Do you own the property?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
Okay, but you are the owner. Okay, thank you. You get all the notices that we've sent?
Oh, yeah, I've acknowledged them.
Okay.
I just have legal stipulations, or I could just plow it down myself, but I can't.
That'd be helpful, because then
Into the
we
mic,
have to
please,
put
ma'am.
a lien on your house.
I realize that, but
We want you to either fix it or somebody to demolish it. It's a nuisance, it's a blight on the community, and by your own acknowledgement, it's unsafe.
oh, yeah. It wasn't mine when it was like that, though. I mean,
But it is now.
it is now.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Ms.
I get
Prestridge.
that, I get
You
that.
bought it in that condition.
Yeah.
Be cheaper to do it yourself.
Yeah. Okay.
But what he's
All right, who's ever speaking in the mic, please?
what city attorney just said is accurate. I mean, that's the process, basically. So it would probably be a lot cheaper if you went ahead and did it yourself. We'll just have to figure out how much it's going to cost. I can't really speak to that at the moment. Haven't crossed that bridge yet.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments with Mr. Pugh? Thank you. Anyone else that wants to speak to this matter? If not, we will close this public hearing and welcome a motion.
Mr. President, may I make a comment?
Huh?
May I make a comment?
Sure.
Ms. Prestridge owns 2 homes that are on our list tonight. It's a shame that you've let these houses deteriorate to the point that your neighbors are extremely concerned about them and nothing has been done. I understand it's a tax lien, but these homes are dangerous for the children in the neighborhood. They're dangerous for the residents. They're extremely concerned about them. For you to come up here and not mention you own it is concerning. I would encourage you to do the right thing and address these properties instead of the city having to do it and coming up here engaging how we're going to handle it. You should handle these properties.
Thank you, Mr. Gwaltney. Chair would welcome a motion and a second for approval.
So moved. Second.
Motion for Mr. Thames, second from Mr. McCluskey. All in favor of this condemnation, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, and that is Resolution 17202. We'll move on to 291117. Public hearing set for tonight for consideration of condemning a house at the following address, 1701 26th Avenue South, requested by Wyatt Pugh. Report from Planning and Development, Mr. Thames.
Yes, sir. The committee met, and after hearing a report from Mr. Pugh, voted 5-0 to send this out without recommendation pending the public hearing.
Thank you, sir. We'll open this public hearing. Who would like to speak to this matter? Mr. Pugh?
All right. The pictures on this one pretty much tell the story. It's got a pretty collapsed structure. It's grown up. There's lots of hazards. It's open. So in my opinion, it is a danger.
Who owns this property?
Ms. Prestridge owns this one as well.
Ms. Prestridge, do you own this property?
It's a tax lien.
You own the property. You bought it, and it's yours. I bet if somebody tried to take it away from you, you'd have a problem with that, wouldn't you?
No, I'll gladly give it back. And that's why I don't want to spend my money to tear it down.
I understand, then don't buy tax liens. You got free advice for no purpose.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm Lee Gregory.
Please into the
Tax lien
microphone.
situation, Ms. Prestridge was advised that if she tore these houses down, there's a possibility that the person that owned the houses could come back legally against her until the tax lien was satisfied. Therefore, she feels that she's had her hands tied.
Here's the circumstance.
And if we're good, we'd tear it down.
Yeah, if it's unsafe, it's unsafe.
And it's been unsafe since long before she bought it.
I appreciate her acknowledging, and you on her behalf acknowledging that, but we can't continue to let it be unsafe. You bought this property subject to its present condition.
We want it down.
Okay, well, you should take it down.
Can we take it down?
Or fix it,
No,
okay?
it's not fixable.
Okay.
Legally,
You need to get your own advice about that. I'm not here to give you any legal advice. I'm just telling you that if it's unsafe, the city's going to take statutory action to correct the unsafeness and essentially assess the property.
And that's kind of what we've been.
That's what the
in limbo.
process is.
So that's what we're here.
I really don't have
So we
anything
can tear it down and we're in good shape.
As far as I'm concerned, you either tear it down or fix it.
Yeah.
If this condemnation passes.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, good. Anyone else, any questions, comments?
The only thing I would add is that, and I'm looking to Mike on this, is, and I assume they're talking about, redemption periods to come back, but I can't imagine, and we're not here to give legal advice, as Mike said, but I can't imagine a redemption period coming back, somebody redeems the property, and they get to hold somebody responsible for making it safe, one way or the other, as ordered by the city council in which the property is located. So you can get your legal advice to that effect, but property's unsafe. Property's unsafe whether you're the owner, whether somebody comes back and redeems the property. So there you go.
All right. Any other comments? We will close this public hearing. Chair would welcome a motion and a second for approval.
So moved.
Motion from Mr.
Second.
McCluskey, second from Mr. Gwaltney. All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's Resolution 17203, and that is passed. All right. 30/11/17 public hearing set for December 18th at 6 p.m. for consideration of condemning a house at the following address, 528 Yorkshire Drive, and that is set. 31/11/17 public hearing set for December 18th at 6 p.m. for consideration of condemning a house at 2516 17th Street South, and that is set. 32/11/17 public hearing set for December 18th at 6 p.m. for consideration of condemning a house at 1612 25th Court South, and that is set. 33/11/17 public hearing set for December 18th at 6 p.m. for consideration of condemning a house at 2708 17th Street South, and that is set. 34/11/17 public hearing set for December 18th, 2017 at 6 p.m. for consideration of condemning a house at 1613 25th Court South, and that is set. Any questions or comments by anyone? Okay. All right. Committee referral agenda. Chair would welcome a motion and a second for approval.
Second.
Excuse me. Motion from Mr. Higginbotham, second from Mr. Wolverton. Any further comments? If there are not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and that is approved. All right, we'll now move to other new business. 08/12/17, request for consideration to set a public hearing and referral to the Special Issues Committee for a variance to the Homewood sign ordinance for an oversized sign at 800 Green Springs Highway, Urban Air, requested by Wes Daniel Signs, and Wyatt Pugh with our BEZ department. We set that public hearing for December 18th, 2017 at 6 p.m. So set. 09/12/17, request to set a public hearing and referral to Planning and Development for consideration of condemning a house at the following address, 2531 18th Place South, and we set that for December 18th.
No, sir, you have to
We
publish.
cannot. So how about January 16th?
Yes, sir.
All right, we'll set this one for January 16th, 2018 at 6 p.m., and that is so set. Thank you. Keep me straight, Mr. Kendrick.
Yes, sir.
All right, let's move on to a couple of the added items. All right, 1217, request for consideration to retain Stifle for bond refinance requested by the city attorney. Mr. Kendrick, would you like to
Yes, sir. At the
elaborate?
Finance Committee, we discussed generally last time that there's an opportunity for the city to refinance a portion of the 2012 warrants. And we've sought advice from Stifle, who has worked with the city over the years past. Essentially, in order for them to provide services to us, there's regulations that require us to enter into an agreement with them, an underwriter's engagement relating to potential municipal securities transaction, and that's attached to the resolution authorizing the mayor to execute this proposal on behalf of the city to seek and to receive advice from Mr. Dunn and his firm, Stifle, Nichols and Company, pursuant to the proposal that's attached as Exhibit A, for us to consider the next item, which is a possible refinancing of a portion of the 2012 warrants.
All right, good. So this would be a resolution?
Yes, sir, it is a resolution.
All right, thank you.
Attached to it as Exhibit A is the agreement with Stifle to render the services and advice to us.
All right, are there any clarification that anyone would want from Mr. Kendrick? All right.
I have something, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make sure I understand this.
Sure.
So what we're doing tonight is to just say that we're going to talk with Stifle about this and then make a decision. We're not voting tonight to make the decision about.
No, so that's the next item.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's a two-item.
Okay. So the first one is just a appoint staff. Okay. All right. Thank you.
We have to do that based on the regulations that Stifle conducts himself under as an underwriter.
Thank you.
All right, Chair would welcome a motion and second. Motion from Mr. Thames, second from Mr. White. Okay. Any further discussion? There being none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that is unanimous, and that is Resolution 17204. The next item is 03-1217, request for consideration of refunding certain portions of the 2012 city government warrants, again requested by our city attorney. Is there any other items you want to mention on this, Mr. Kendall?
Yes, so there's an ordinance essentially that sets out parameters for the refinancing of a portion of the 2012. It limits it to no more than $9,750. It also limits it to, in its present form, to a savings of 3%. Based, and the reason there's some parameters essentially is no one can predict what the market rate would be at the time any potential bonds, if authorized by the council, would be sold to refund the 2012. Coupled with the fact that the present congressional legislation that's pending in Congress would prohibit us from, in the future, from advance refunding these type warrants. So there's a great deal of activity in the bond market between now and December 31, not just by municipalities or governmental agencies, but by all 501c3 profits. We've got a Lakeshore proposal, YMCA call today, essentially because the legislation in its current form would prohibit 501c3's private placement activities from being entitled to finance their project with these interest-free bonds. So there's a great deal of activity in the market. And Fred Semper, my partner's here, and he's my lawyer, so if you have real questions of him, I'll get you to answer that. He's our bond lawyer. But based on the current rates as of today, the refunding of these warrants that's proposed would be about $700,000 savings after all cost. Who knows what the rate might be? It could be better, it could be worse, but we put in the draft that was sent to you today a 3% minimum savings. I will say this, after December 31, based on the current legislation, there won't be any more refunding, so you can determine what level of savings you want to meet to be the floor before we would go forward, would try to sell these refinancing of these bonds, replacement bonds, if you'd like, and I have one that's blank, I'll leave that discretion to the council, but at the current, under the current rates today, the savings would be approximately $700,000.
All right, so
if you choose to go forward. But it's something that you'll need to do tonight if you choose to do that, because there's a rating call with Moody's tomorrow and a rating call with Standard & Poor's on Wednesday. All the things that have to be done, there has to be an issuance of a public statement. Yeah. There's a POS, there's a lot of work to be done to even try to get it done by the end of the month, and there's no assurance, although we think that there is, will be a significant savings for the city. If there's no savings, then certainly we wouldn't go forward with the project. Whatever time spent by my office or Mr. Dunn is just part of doing business. But we need your authorization to move forward if you elect to do that.
And I was just curious, the total amount of bonds were, I didn't add them up, but just approximately with that would generate the
Fred, do you recall
estimated
what the total was?
700,000.
Please come forward. Finance no more than
Parameters is not to exceed $9,750,000. That's just to take into account that what's available in the market right now are discount bonds to get the deal done. So there's $8 million of these bonds that we're funding 2040 through 42. We may have some discount bonds, so we're going up to $9,750,000. It's probably going to be less than that, but that's to give the city up to like $700,000 or more or a little bit less in present value savings up front and cash to spend on capital projects before the end of the year.
And pardon the layman's question on this, but when would be the lock-in date? I know we got to do all this preliminary work.
The market's going to probably shut down a couple of days before the Christmas holiday weekend.
So sometime a couple of days before. I know you don't know exactly.
Tonight's like we got to sell next week to close the week between Christmas and New Year's.
Okay.
Because the lock-in date is to close by the end of the year under the current Senate and House version of the bill. We don't know what conference committee is going to come out with. They may give a transition period. They may not. We have no idea. And if they do give a transition period and we recommend it, we may not do it. But this is just to lock in these savings. Which if we don't do it now and the bill stays the way it is right now, you won't be able to do it in 2022.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you can't do it till 2022.
Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. Thames.
And I guess 700,000 is about 8% savings to the city.
That's right.
It seems to me, especially if this opportunity is going away, as long as the city ends up saving money, even if it's something under 3%.
Typically, 3% is kind of a
standard.
It's kind of a standard. 8% is good.
Well, I understand, but I'm saying I'll take 2%. I'll take 0.5 as long as the city.
It's money you're not going to get. This is after cost. We're talking about after cost.
Correct. As long as the city ends up saving money, I think we need to take advantage of the opportunity.
And I think that's going to be the sentiment of this council. Now, if you want us to formalize that, I will, Mr. Kendrick.
Well,
it's an ordinance.
It's an ordinance you'll have to adopt tonight to be able to move forward.
But then, therefore, I'll let you do the first reading.
Yes, sir. It's a lengthy ordinance. It's an ordinance authorizing the issuance of not exceeding $9,750,000 principal amount of general obligation warrants refunding 2017. There's a table of contents. I'll go through. There's a definition section, section 101, spells out all the terms and conditions. Section 2 is representations and warranties. Section 3 is the warrants that will be authorized. Section 4 is the amount that we've talked about, not to exceed the sum of $9,750,000, possibly less. We had to put a cap on it for the city's knowledge. The form of the warrants are attached. Essentially, it'd be a refunding warrant of the general obligation warrants from 2012 issued this year. The net savings part is included. Excuse me, I'm getting ahead of myself. Section 304 talks about the execution and registration and the authentication of the bonds. 305 speaks to temporary warrants. 306 is the registration and transfer of the warrants to be issued. 307 deals with mutilation or lost warrants. 308 deals with the payment of interest on the warrants. 309 deals with the persons deemed the owners of the warrants. 310 deals with the paying agent and the registrar of the bonds, the warrants, excuse me. 311 deals with the payment due and the date and other business dates. 312 deals with cancellation, 313 deals with a book entry system. Article 4 deals with representations and warrants to be made by the city. Section 402 deals with election to redeem. Section 403 deals with the selection of a paying agent of the warrants to be redeemed. Section 404 deals with notice of redemption. Section 405 deals with the deposit of redemption price. Section 406 deals with the warrants payable on redemption date. Section 407 deals with the warrants redeemed in part. Article 5 deals with the sources of payment. Section 501 is general obligations of the city. Section 502 provisions for the payment of the warrants. Section 6 deals with the warrant fund. Section 602 deals with the transfer of the funds. Section 603 deals with the security for the warrant fund. Section 604 is investment of warrant fund. Article 4 deals with the sale and delivery of the warrants and appointment of bond counsel, which would be our firm, and also appoints section authorizes an official statement in closing papers, which Mr. Simpler and Ms. Salter have been working on, that would need to be completed before the bonds could be sold. Section 704 deals with the application of the proceeds, the redemption of the refunded 2012 warrants. As Fred said, this money that you would save could be used for capital projects, just like the original issuance of the warrants, only for capital projects. Section 8 deals with the miscellaneous provisions that are typical of these type of things, dealing with the tax certificate agreement, the payment of attorney's fees, provisions of an ordinance on the contract, severability clause, section notice of the warrant to the gift warrant holders, section 807, repeal of the conflicting provisions, 801, the effect of the headings, 809, the effective date, which will be upon the passage of the City Council and approval by the mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Kendrick. Chair would welcome a motion and a second for unanimous consent.
So moved.
Motion from Mr. Higginbotham, second from Mr. McCluskey. Sorry, he beat you to that. All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Gwaltney?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Thames?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Higginbotham?
Yes.
Mr. Wolverton?
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey?
Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Wyatt?
Yes.
Mrs. Andreas?
Yes.
Mr. Wright?
Yes.
Mr. Limbaugh?
Yes, so this will be ordinance 2682, and Chair would welcome a motion and a second for adoption.
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Mr. McCluskey, second from Mr. Thames. All right, roll call.
Mr. Gwaltney?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Thames?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Higginbotham?
Yes.
Mr. Wolverton?
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey?
Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Wyatt?
Yes.
Mrs. Andreas?
Yes.
Mr. Wright?
Yes.
And Mr. Limbaugh?
Yes, so 2682 passes unanimously.
Mr. Limbaugh, just for the record, section 7.01 deals with the sale of the warrants, and as I understand, based on the comments made by Mr. Thames, we're to move forward if there's savings of any kind for the city.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Note that the council all nodded yes. Okay. All right. Next item, 10-12-17, request for consideration of approval of vouchers for a period of November 27th, 2017 through December 10th, 2017, requested by the City Treasurer, the Finance Committee, Ms. Smith.
I believe Mr. Wright.
Mr. Wright?
I did, Mr. President. I believe there is one invoice that I'm going to pull, and I'll share it with the council, obviously, and that is the Transit Authority's statement for services provided in regard to, we are waiting on them to provide some accountability information that we've requested. What I'm not clear about, Melody, I may ask you to elaborate. What I'm not clear about is when they received the request and the exact charge of services that we're asking to be paid at this point in time. It may be that our request that they have received really pertains to future bus services, as opposed to the bus services that came through the receipts for this period of time.
Mr. Wright, my understanding was that what you just said was the case, and therefore to pull that without the proper information from them would more correctly occur in the first quarter of 2018.
All right, well.
So therefore.
Yes, sir, that was the October through December of 2018, the quarterly, and we didn't get all the signatures and Ms. Murdoch for them to know the conditions that were added until after October 1st had already passed. So
All right, so can you make that known to them?
it'd be my recommendation if y'all would just pay, because we're already behind, we already need to get this one paid to consider it for the next, because we're going to have quarterly installments. That's just 1 of 4, but that's.
Yeah, in the agreement, originally, we modified it to include the quarterly payment section, but it did spell out the quarterly payment. In fact, it was attached to the invoice. Invoice was attached to the agreement. And we also provided the ridership and some financial statements from him. And that was provided as a red line that was sent to them. They're aware of it now. I'm not sure they knew about it October 1st.
They did not.
All right, well, then frankly, as a.
The next invoice ought to have some of those conditions may be better satisfied.
I can make sure Ms. Murdoch knows.
So
if you
it
want
would
me to
seem
tomorrow.
appropriate to me to go ahead and approve that invoice as well. And,
Well, we've got the benefit of the of the deal, so to speak, to that point. Now, whether we go forward, that's called.
Okay. All right. So with that, I'll amend my previous statement, and we'll go ahead and approve the vouchers, including the latest Bus Transit Authority invoice for the period of November 27 through December 10, 2017.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wright. So we have a motion from Mr. Wright. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Higginbotham. Any further discussion? There being none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's Resolution 17204. Mayor, you're okay. Mr. Gwaltney.
I just wanted to add one simple comment. I would like to encourage my fellow council members to go visit their firemen at the various stations across the city. I went and had lunch with them a few weeks ago, and they reiterated to me that they would love to see any of you if you'd like to come out. If you would like to go, I'll be glad to arrange it. Feel free to reach out to me, and we'll go have better lunch than I would normally have during the week. So,
I'm sure. All right, thank you, Mr. Gwaltney. Mr. Thames.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the council for the public hearings this evening. That's an important topic in our ward, and something that Councilman Gwaltney and I were repeatedly asked to address. So I'm excited that we're starting down that road, and there's more to come, obviously, at the next meeting. So I appreciate the council, and I appreciate Mr. Pugh and then Mr. Kendrick assisting with that. We do have a ward meeting tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock at the rec center. If anyone would like to attend.
Good.
That is it. Thank you.
Are you setting P&D?
Do you have anything to set for next week for P&D?
I don't think I do. There was one item tabled that I have not been told needs to come off the table, so no P&D.
All right, good. By the way, finance will be 5 o'clock.
Is this on January?
We work through the.
That on 12/18 before council? Is that on 12/18 before council meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Thames.
All right, Mr. Higginbotham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the only comment I would make is to encourage everyone to remember that tomorrow is our special election for the United States Senate, and it's a pretty important vote, and I would encourage everybody to be sure to study the issues and make the choice that seems the right one to them. I would also add on my West Homewood Facebook page, I do have links there to information about where your polling place is, if for some reason you don't know where the polling place is, as well as what constitutes valid ID to make sure that you have valid ID when you get to the polling place. But I really think that in this election that the suburbs are going to play a particularly important role and maybe the deciding factor one way or the other in the election, and that the eyes of I'd say not only the eyes of the state, but the eyes of the world are on us and what we do tomorrow. So I do want to encourage people to take it very seriously and to get out and vote. And I think that's all I had to say tonight, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Wolverton?
I'll just second what Mike said, because none of us would be here if people didn't go out to vote. Other than that, that's it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. McCluskey?
So, Mr. Jones, how long do you think it'll take for your committee? Oh, and he still gets 5 o'clock, huh? Not even here to answer.
I know. Boy, I tell you what.
You think 30?
30 is all he gets?
All right, we'll do.
The back page can be set. Okay. And I'll send you the notice of the public hearing.
We're in here,
For 16.
So, I mean, 5:30?
Public
safety? I'm good with that?
How much time do you need?
I'll need 15 minutes, tops.
But we may look at...
Well, I mean, I guess we're... Yeah, because we have council meeting at 6.
At 6.
This one we didn't sit down.
Okay. I think I only have one item for special issues.
Okay.
Is that all, Mr. McCluskey?
No, but I guess we're making sure that the times need to be where they're going to be.
Okay.
So, I mean,
So you want us to send it to the committee?
should I just take 10?
Yeah, I mean, we did that.
Is that going to help you? Because yours is always bigger than, your agenda is always bigger than ours.
I don't know. I think, I mean, there's one carried over and one new on the referral. And then Peter's saying 5.
I have a meeting, but
yeah.
it'll be very, very brief.
So, I mean, if you think you can do it in 5, I mean 10.
I tell you what, I'll go from 5:30 to 5:35.
Whoa.
I can do this. I'm looking at it now. I can do this in 5.
Okay.
I can do this in 5.
Thank you, Mr. McCluskey. What else?
I do want to thank Melody and her staff for putting together the parade float from last week. It was so much fun. Hate that you couldn't be there. The penguin hats were fantastic. Kids loved them. Parade always.
Kudos to Claire Jackson.
Yes, that's right. Kudos to Claire. And of course, Mayor and JJ. And I mean, it just went off without a hitch like it always does. And such a great community feel. And I have to say it because I say it every year. I can't believe how fast it's cleaned up. It's incredible. You go down the next morning, it's just like never happened. It's fantastic. And I think that's it.
All right. Just because,
Mr. Jones, Ms. Smith?
yes, Patrick made me nervous about me not being able to get mine done in time. So I'm going to take till 5:50, but that still gives you.
5:55, really.
Well, I mean, okay. Well, hopefully I'll.
5:30. Are you at 5:35 with
I'm at 5:35 to 5:50. We're running a very tight ship here. It's minutes. Minutes.
I'll remind everyone of that, but keep going. Thank you.
And that's all.
Nothing tonight.
Thank you. Ms. Andrews?
Vote tomorrow. And thank you, Melody and Claire, and we had a great time and wish I could have been there, and it was a lot of fun. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Wright?
Yes, okay, I'll do 5:50 to 5:52. No, I'll do 5:50 to 6 o'clock, but it'll be, I hope to not have to consider anything. We'll see how it goes, but I do need to have to set it. Couple quick things. Melody, thank you as well. Just want you to know that does not go unnoticed. And also, I just wanted to take just 15 seconds, I hope, just to commend someone who we commended today, and that was Chris Meeks. I just want to say a few things about Chris. He didn't, of course, he's not here, but I'm going to say it anyhow. But I've been impressed with Chris for a long time over what he has done as a 100% pure volunteer. Of what he has done with that Park Rec Board in volunteering his time and effort and his skill set to the recreational center, and much less to all the other improvements to the Park Board, has really set a standard in the city, and I really think he has inspired so many others to serve. And I'm just a little disappointed that we let him off and let him get out. But he has certainly done his due, and he was due those accolades today. And I'm just very grateful for his public service and the standard that he set, and look forward to others following in his footsteps. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. One of the slightly frustrating things about being president is that, y'all get to pass on all these accolades and comments that I have written down that don't need to be repeated over and over again. But 1, vote. 2, we have one of the best floats that are there to be had, and it's because of all the hard work that the city
Claire
clerks.
Jackson.
Well, yes, Claire.
When I say what my strengths are, that is not a strength of mine.
But-
I know how to surround myself with people that it is.
But you know, I've had the privilege of riding those floats for 5 years, and it's fun. And so we appreciate being able to do that. With that, we will adjourn this meeting and say we will meet again next Monday evening at 6 p.m. Thank you.